What's up, everyone? My name is Jonathan, host here at The Jono Show. I am so thrilled today to be joined by Alexa Martinez. She is a sex coach. She is a business mentor and coach as well. And she's joining us here today from where are you based out of?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation too. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. I want to know, well, first, that sex chick. I mean, that's your branding. Where did that even come from? Because that's where you're at. I mean, anyone listening or watching this on YouTube, that's where you can find Alexa. She's that sex chick. But how did that even come about? How are you that sex chick?
Yeah, so I have really great friends who are in the branding world.
Okay, that helps.
No, I mean, really where it came from is that's what I would hear a lot. I was actually doing a branding exercise with this friend. Her name is Jessica Zweig. She runs Simply Be Agency in Chicago, and I absolutely love her. I was at this workshop. I was really just there attending as her friend, and I got so much out of it. And there was an exercise one day that was about our tagline. So if your name was the title of the book, then what's the tag? Like what else is on the book cover? And I just struggled. I had all the answers to everything else, all of the sex questions answered, all of the, ideal client avatar and all of that stuff. But I couldn't get this one exercise down. And she came to me at one of the tables and saw that I was kind of struggling with it. And I said, I could be this and I could be that. And I was like, but most people just know me as that sex chick. I walk into a place and someone will know who I am or know what I do. And then I'll hear it out of the corner, just in the peripheral, someone will say, oh yeah, that's Alexa. Do you know who that is? She's that sex chick. She talks about the this and the that. And so it just, as I said it to her, a little light bulb went off and we ran with it. And now it's all over the place. And I'm like, wow, that really worked.
I love that. Well, and we're going to get into a little bit of this and that, like you said, we're going to get into that. And I'm excited to know more about your story. But prior to this, were you actively helping coach people through relationships and sexual stuff? Like, how did you kind of even start down this road where people started knowing you as that sex chick?
Yeah, so I did not intend to do this. I am from the deep south of Louisiana. My family has been there over 300 years, since before New Orleans was New Orleans. We have lived off of the islands and then, the little tip of the boot, and grew up very Catholic. And so I really think that my mom wishes I did. She did wish that I did anything else. It was kind of like, oh God, now what is Alexa doing? I'm the baby of the family. And so I also did life very unconventionally. And so I think she wasn't necessarily shocked, but I think she wasn't anticipating it to turn into what it has turned into. And so, every now and then I get a little like, you did good, girl, So, my mom has been the caterer for two of my in-person retreats. She's taken the road of, I'm going to try to understand my daughter instead of wish she did anything other than what she's doing. And so, how I got started, I really thought I was going to do life the more traditional way. I was taught, like many young women who are like on the edge of, the millennials, that I needed to, and being in the deep South, it was, you live to eventually become a wife and a mother one day. However, you're empowered because of the time that you live in, and you can vote and you can make decisions and you can go to college and you can get an education, but don't let all of those things weigh too much into what you decide to do with your life, because ultimately you're going to leave it all to be a wife and a mother. Mm-hmm. And I thought I was going to have all of those things. I thought that I was going to get the career and the job and the husband and the kids and all that, because I thought that was what I was supposed to want. I thought that that's what life was supposed to involve. I had a high school sweetheart. It didn't work out. I wound up leaving college, falling in love with a man who I met on a cruise vacation. It was actually my graduation from college, which I graduated from USM, University of Southern Mississippi, the degree in biological sciences and forensics. That's what I thought I was going to do. And well, event at first, and then I changed it a couple of times and thought I was going to go pre-med, or down the medical road. And on that vacation, celebrating my bachelor's degree, I met and fell in love with a man from South Africa who was a crew member. 2 months later, I joined him on cruise ships, and I lived and worked on cruise ships, selling and studying art for almost 6 years. And so we were together for the first 4 of those. And then the remaining 2, I traveled the world solo. And that relationship taught me so much about myself, because I completely and totally lost who I was as an individual, as a person. And I was very conflicted with what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to be and act, because through that process, I traveled to 79 countries. And that took me very far out of the South.
Wow.
And so very challenged by life. And eventually I hit a couple of what I call rock bottoms, where things are so crunchy and hard and difficult. And I gained a bunch of weight. I had a lot of anxiety. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I got to a point where I can't live like this anymore in that relationship. And then I was left with myself, and I got to another, I can't live like this anymore. And I found personal development. And then through personal development, conferences, books, coaches, I grew. Through that process, I also wound up realizing that no matter what area I grew in, mindset, nutrition, health, meditation, I was in meditation, no matter what area of my life that I was focusing on, whenever that hot guy would walk into the room, I'd turn into a 14-year-old again, and I wouldn't know what to do. So relationships really, I was so afraid of doing it wrong again. I was so afraid of doing it like I'd seen my mom do it when I was growing up. And so I grew in all these other areas, but I kind of stayed away for a little while from relationships. And it was really only when I intentionally and consciously and cautiously started reintegrating and looking at relationships in a different way did my entire life change. My first, I would say, experiences in a non-monogamous relationship really challenged me and helped me grow. I was given the book recommendation, Sex at Dawn. That changed so much for me. Right behind that, I got into a relationship with someone who practiced BDSM. And I didn't have that language for it when we first got into the relationship, but I have it now that's what was going on. And it was the first time that I was in a relationship where someone showed me things about my body that I had no idea I could do, and held space in a very, very unique way. And so I was absolutely fascinated by Eros and the ways people get turned on and the ways that they can express themselves when it comes to sexuality. So it was really through perpetual, insatiable curiosity after my life experiences that eventually I started writing about them online. Writing about them online turned into a community turned into, can you coach me? And now fast forward 4 years and it looks like all kinds of things. It looks like having a podcast and being a guest on your show. And yeah, I get to talk to some really cool people about so many different taboo subjects. And those taboo subjects can go all the way to, kink and BDSM, but they can also be like talking about sex and money and finances and relationship, or, talking about no desire after having a baby, or, how to create intimacy in a relationship after you've lost a loved one. So those are all taboo subjects too. So
it's crazy.
My world is very colorful now.
Yeah. Well, and in the best way possible. I just feel like you found an area of your life that you constantly felt unsure about, that you maybe struggled with getting back in that because maybe you had been burned before, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming from that background, you felt like there was a personal need. And as you developed that personal need and you were authentic about it, and you kind of put your story or your experiences or what you were learning out there, you developed that tribe and that community. And I think that's so powerful. And as you're talking, I wanted to let you just go, but I had so many different things. I want to go back really quick. So you said you were the youngest, correct?
Yes, I am the baby.
Okay. And how many siblings do you have?
So my sister and I, we have different fathers. My sister was my mom had my sister when she was 19 and then had me at 32. So we're 13 years apart.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm kind of the only and also the baby at the same time.
Absolutely. Do you think birth order has anything to do with, those kids that kind of want to push the boundaries a little bit?
I think so. But I also don't study that aspect of human psychology. But just looking at my sister and I, and looking at some of my closest friends and their siblings, I got engaged at the end of 2020, and we're now talking about a lot of bridal things that I've never spoken about. And my sister visited recently, and she said my mom was also with us, and my mom said something, and then my sister responded like in a way that was, well, Lexa gets to have whatever she wants. I was like, wait, where'd that come from? I was like, we're so far apart in age, you don't even know what I had versus, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. So there's little pieces and parts that, I think my sister is known as the smart one and I'm known as the pretty one in the family, like undercover, but we're both smart and both beautiful. But it's just this, like, the value was put on her being meticulous and structured and organized. Her and my brother-in-law have been together since they were in high school, and they're in their 40s now. So, and I just did it very different.
Yeah. Well, and I was wondering if you felt like that had to do at all, because, I'm in my family, I'm the oldest, 3 younger girls. So I'm also the only male in our family, the only guy in our family. And just looking at, my youngest sister and me, we're kind of on these polar opposites. I was definitely the black sheep in the family, the one who always pushed it. I actually grew up in Texas as well. And sex wasn't really something that we talked about. Sex was kind of one of those taboo subjects, along with politics and maybe some other things, where we maybe had a conversation in the kind of maybe religious side, like however much, the Christianity came into play. But really, that's where sexual education kind of stopped. And we were left to figure a lot of that stuff out on our own. And I know many listeners and many people who are going to hear this, they probably had that same experience as well. You end up kind of having those bees and birds and bees conversations with your peers, or watching porn or whatever. So we take kind of our sexual norms from these different places. And I think it's so powerful what you're doing. You're really digging in deeper and helping people maybe break some bad habits that have been set by some of these bad things. Or not bad things, but maybe things that have just been twisted a little bit. When you think about the clients that you work with, do you see common themes coming up again and again and again, or are there kind of, is it everywhere? I'm sure you get a lot of different stuff, but are there kind of some consistent issues that you see yourself dealing with the clients you serve?
Yeah. Yes, I do. And I think the most common one is people who want more from their sex, love, and intimacy, because intimacy is not exclusive to sex and other way around, but they want more, but they don't know what the more is and they don't know how to get it. So they only understand the position that they're currently in, and they're not necessarily satisfied. And generally speaking, people who are my clients or in my community, I think the last time I checked my community space on Facebook, and I also checked on my Instagram, it's like 70% women. And so, I mean, usually people find me
just because you're a woman.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's probably I attract more of me, and I attract me from several years ago. So, people who I just find that that's a common, I don't want to say necessarily a complaint, but kind of a complaint for women, is that they're bored. Mm-hmm. They are bored. And it's not in the conversation of, is it, I just don't have libido, or I just don't, I'm not interested in sex, or is it boredom? That is a big conversation, because I always say, maybe it's not that you don't want sex. Maybe it's that you don't want the sex the same way that you've been delivered the sex since you got together with your partner. And that is very much an aspect of sex education, and that we're not afforded, and still not afforded. The vast majority of the United States is mandated abstinence only sex education, and it doesn't have to be biologically or medically accurate. It doesn't have to be, which is fascinating, meaning you can interweave religion into the delivery, if there even is a delivery. to young people. But then we grow up and it's like, wow, this is really messing with my life, you know? So I get that a lot.
And that's something I'm so passionate about here, because like we were talking about before the show started, it's kind of like, I think success and happiness in so many different ways is a combination of stuff. And so when we, if you have this incredible career, you're doing what you love and you're passionate about, and you are married and your spouse, there is that friction because you feel like that's an area of your life that you're missing. That will oftentimes result in a bunch of different behaviors that maybe aren't necessarily healthy and could even be destructive to everything else that's going on in your life. But it's because some needs aren't being met. And so again, like coming back to it, I think it's so cool that you're tackling this, because not everyone needs to know about marketing. Not everyone needs to know about sales. Not everyone needs to know about how YouTube ads work, or, all these cameras or whatever else. But I think this is so, fundamental to who we are as humans. And so I love it. So you said a frustration is primarily in the women that you work with. So you said boredom is a frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, we get into partnership and get into relationship, especially people who want to start a family or they already have a family started, or just a long-term relationship in general. We're looking for a person that's safe, who's consistent and reliable, who shows up, who you can communicate with, all of these things. But humans like adventure. Humans like spontaneity. Humans like risk just as much as they like all of the other things. And so oftentimes we prioritize the safety and the security, when that doesn't mean that the rest of our desires are going to just dissipate. I think you find someone who is all of those great foundational things, who will inspire you in the relationship to take risks, to go up against edges, to grow and expand. And, my partner and I, it is an ongoing thing. And this is my work. We get into some situations where I'm like, wow, we've been doing this the same way for a minute. Like, we get to take responsibility for the fact that we know that we want more. So we have to give it to ourselves. It means we have to be active in this unfolding and not just a passive participant in life circumstances, just giving us the routine over and over again. So,
and are we talking about, I mean, let's get to the nitty gritty here. Are you talking about, same positions, same kind of, because I think for a lot of us, like you said, we fall into routine. Are you talking about, when you're talking about being adventurous or stepping out, is it trying BDSM or trying different, like introducing new elements sexually? Are you talking about new partners? Like what are you talking about as far as switching it up?
I'm kind of talking about a little bit of all of that, really. Just depends. And when I say kind of, we've been doing the same thing, it's a little less the positions and that kind of thing. And it's more the energy. It's more the A leads to B leads to C. And we start a certain way, and the whole flow, the energy, because it might be different positions happen. And then I climax, you climax, we're done. But erotic expression can look so different than that. And in a long-term relationship, a lot of times you have desire and arousal that is not spontaneous. Spontaneous arousal is like, you look from across the room, you catch your eyes of your partner, and all of a sudden you're both wildly turned on, and you meet in the middle and you fuck on the floor. Wait, I didn't ask. Can I say the F word on your show?
Absolutely. This is a fuck-free environment, or a fuck accepted. We're good with that.
We're inclusive to fucks.
Yes, we're inclusive to fucks. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Because I meant to ask before we got started.
Let's fire away. We're good.
Great, because I've held myself back a couple times. I'm like, I don't know what rating this is. This an explicit show? I say fuck a lot on my podcast.
Handle it. I love it.
So anyway, you meet in the middle, and it's on the kitchen floor or the living room floor, and you're just so hot for each other. It's like, come on now. We've been in a relationship for 4 years, and you pooped with the door open yesterday. Like, this idea that this spontaneous explosion of arousal is going to happen every time sex is available is just not realistic. And so I happen to think that if you participate with it a little bit more and set yourself up for some new fun and unique things, then you have a higher likelihood of having those spontaneous bursts of arousal actually happening.
I want the audience to go check out some of your recent posts about planning sex, because I
Mhm.
think that it was so well said, but kind of give us a little bit of your perspective on that, because that's kind of what you're talking about. You're talking about these, moments where there's so much chemistry not being accidental. But we've been so programmed to think kind of like in this movie, like you said, your eyes lock and it's just this spontaneous combustion that happens. It's just completely unplanned. How do you keep that energy going, but plan it or set a zone, set a space for it?
Sure. And I think about the movies, and usually they're like, they can't get through the door fast enough, and then they have sex on like the foyer table, like right through the door, and she's up against the wall, and like the candle is on the floor, like the candelabra fall or whatever. It's just this like explosion, like you said. Like we walk in,
It's
it's like,
knocked off
okay,
the table. Yeah, rent. Yep,
yeah,
yep. I'm with you.
yeah. So I like to, which a lot of my community and a lot of our business, because my partner and I now work together, a lot of our business comes from us sharing our own personal stories. So I love that you're asking like me specifically in my relationship, because sure, I can talk about my clients and my community members, but like my embodied experience is my real life.
Mhm.
So for Jordan and I'll just share, and I'm sure that your listeners will resonate in some way to what I'm about to say. I run a business, and I run an unconventional business that when I first got started, I had no idea what I was doing, nor did I know the direction that it was eventually going to go in. I didn't know how much money it was going to make. I didn't know how viable the whole thing was, and like, could I keep it running? And so over the last 4 years, it's been a lot of strength on my part, type A on my part, very fiery, very grounded, a lot of decisions, a lot of like super late nights, a lot of tears. And like, this is a part of who I am. What I have now and how I share in the spaces and everything that I create is very much a part of who I am. And I have a really hard time getting out of the office and going from Alexa, that sex chick, sex coach business mentor, to Alexa, like sweet submissive kitten, the girlfriend, the fiance, the partner, make dinner, put on music, be all feminine. I get out of the office and my dick is just as big as his, and we can't really get anything done
Yep.
that way. That's how I feel about that, and I'm very aware of it. Doesn't make the experience easier. Sometimes I'm just like, ugh, my T is just as high, and like testosterone is a sex drive hormone, but when it's too high, which being in this type A decision making role, I can wind up having my testosterone pretty high all throughout the day. It's just hard to work and flow with transitioning into, love. And so we really like to plan. Like if it's on my calendar, then I can mentally prepare myself to transition. And that has really helped. It's not that way for everyone, but those people who might resonate with me, or you have a partner that's like me, that might help. I call it toggles, or for those Harry Potter fans, port keys, where you touch it and it transports you to a different place. So a port key or a toggle could look like the startup of a ritual. So something to help you transition from one place to the next place. And that could be from your office to your bedroom, for those of you who are working at home like me. And maybe that's like lighting a candle. It's putting it on a particular playlist. It's laying out a certain blanket. And so we have a blanket that when that blanket's on the bed, it is a message to my nervous system to prepare for pleasure, because I'm going to do it. I'm going to consciously choose the intimacy anyway.
Mhm.
But my nervous system, I could be in my head fighting it for the first 10 to 15 minutes, or I can take some deep breaths and put the playlist on and this thing, and to try to settle down. So we plan. Now, when we plan, it doesn't always look like the blanket's on the bed and then assume the position. The blanket's on the bed, but we might not go to where the blanket is for a while. Also, I really love when I have instruction, because then I don't have to make any more decisions. And so my partner, sometimes he will be downstairs, I will be upstairs, and he will text me what to do. And it is just like, take me now. If you just tell me what to do, take me now because I'm doing that all day. I don't want to do that anymore. So that helps as well. We also have designated time at least once a month where we try something new, and there's no pressure for it to be sexy. Because if there's pressure for it to be sexy, usually it's a little awkward, you know? So it's more like you just be a scientist and I will give you feedback and vice versa.
Totally.
And then usually it gets sexy later, but the initial figuring the toy out or the position or the whatever is like, just give some space to see what happens. And then we can maybe put it into something sexy later.
Totally. I love that because I think so many people, there may be different things that are taboo, depending on the culture you come from, depending on the environment you come from. Maybe it's anal. Maybe that's like, oh my God, you know, maybe it's like using toys or, you know, using toys with your partner, you know, maybe it's, you know, whatever it is, having that exploration phase, I think is cool because then it doesn't put the pressure. I love that you said that. Random question that just popped into my mind that I'm curious about. You know, oftentimes we as humans, I know if I'm constantly focused on business, then generally I'm going to think more things about business and ideas are going to pop, like lucky things are going to happen business related. If I'm thinking about sex, more often than not, sex might happen, right? Do you feel like you are more aroused, or do you feel like you can get more aroused because you are constantly working on sex? Or does it have the polar effect because you're dealing with all of this like trauma and like breakage, and you're just like, at the end of the day, you're like, ugh, I can't. Do you find yourself more or less as far as like your ability to get there personally?
Sure. Arousal. I'm aroused all throughout the day because of the work that I do. But I don't think that that is 100% to do with the content. I think that it's because I love life and I love the life that I've created. And so my life and my business definitely turns me on. I do a podcast, or I launch a freebie, or a program launches very successfully or something like that. And I'm very turned on by all the things. And I'm turned on by who we get to serve, and at the level that each year that goes by, the level that we get to serve too, because we're changing people's lives and that feels fucking good. Yeah. You know, that's hot.
Yeah. This success, the kind of like, it's your flow. I feel that. Yep.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I do. I will say that because of what I do, there are some things that I'm less sensitive to. And that's on purpose. You know, it would take a lot to shock me when it comes to preferences and sexuality and stories, because I feel like I've done the work in order to desensitize, meaning if you come to me and you have something that is maybe shameful or traumatic, something like that, I've done the work that way. When you deliver that information to me, I can regulate my nervous system in a way that allows for you to know that you are safe and you are not a burden when you communicate with me. And so,
do you feel like a lot of people come into the discussion with you feeling like they're almost at their wit's end, and so that's why they're turning to you? Or is this, do you find yourself working with a lot of people that are trying to, it's the last ditch attempt to fix something, or more people who want to just really accelerate something quality that they already have?
So I get a little bit of both, but more often than not, it's people who really care. They really care about this. And not to say that people who are not going to do work in this area don't care. They're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have and the awareness level that they have and consciousness level that they have. And so I think people, more often than not, the story where they're at and on their journey, it sounds a lot like, we have something pretty good and we'd like for it to be much better. You know, it's usually very growth oriented type people who are growing in other areas of their life. And now it's finally time to grow in this one. You know, their business is booming. They've got all the things done. And it's just like, oh, this is the area that's slightly lackluster. Or it's kind of like, if I let this keep going in this direction, like this is just okay, but I'm not settling for okay in the other areas. So I'm going to go here.
I'm curious about being kind of satisfied in the relationship. And you mentioned something that I want to kind of go back to and kind of bring it to what we're talking about right now. Sure. Relationships that are not monogamous, right? I never had even heard of such a thing. Maybe growing up, just maybe in the outside of like being Mormon or something like that, right? And it be more of a religious thing, having multiple partners. But then I was exposed actually to Aubrey Marcus and Whitney Miller, yes, and just they were very vocal about their relationship and kind of the dynamic there. And of course, they aren't together anymore as far as I know. But all that aside, the experiences that you've had with that, do you work with people who are not in monogamous relationships?
I do, yes. And for anyone who wants to listen, I did an episode with Whitney Miller of my show talking about unconventional relationships and then also public breakups because her and Aubrey wound up ending their relationship, and that's a whole story. So definitely check that out if you're interested in unconventional relationships, because I think that it's important to do your due diligence and do research on how other people have done it and the pitfalls. Because if you're going to go into a relationship that has more than one other person's traumas and emotions and different desires and boundaries and all of that, then you better be real good at communicating and regulating yourself, because, people get into sometimes monogamous relationships and then it ends. And for whatever the reason, they think, oh, I'm just not built for this. Built, humans were more egalitarian, like they're bonobo and, primate cousins or whatever. And my thing is, it's definitely an option, a viable option for a lot of people. Polyamory, many loves, which is a word that's half Latin, half Greek, but it works. And it's great for a lot of people, but understand what it comes with. So being in a relationship with one person, if that is hard, add another person and it's going to be extra, extra hard. So just know my advice on that is know who the fuck you are. And if that question is very challenging, then sit in meditation, drink some plant medicine, do something in the way of getting to know yourself on a deep level, and then know your why. And if your why and you're deeply connected to this is you want to fuck around and see what happens, then own that. So I would say whatever your reason behind wanting to try these different kinds of relationship structures, know what it's going to come with, or have an idea of what it's going to come with. Know where you stand in it and know what your why is. That way the people who are opting in with you can get down with your why and you can communicate that effectively. So
for the average person, maybe who's not interested in polyamory.
Yeah.
Did I mess it up? Did I do it?
No, it was good.
Polyamory. Cool. For the average person that maybe is not into that, but they are looking to just kind of spice things up a little bit more or whatever, how much is too much? I mean, if we're opening this kind of Pandora's box of all of these different things, is there a point that you would give advice to me or any of the listeners that it's like, okay, these are kind of some boundaries or some borders, or is it just every man or woman for themselves? Like where are you kind of at with, is there a too far in this?
It depends on your level of inness in the relationship. And if
inness, like
inness in the relationship.
Got it. Makes sense. More casual versus, okay, I understand.
How in are you with this person? Like Jordan and I have a phrase or a saying that we go back to, which is out is not an option. It doesn't mean that we will stay in the relationship if it is really not in alignment and we're struggling and there's no end in sight. But it does mean that I don't repetitively go to the idea of maybe I'll just leave. We completely took a vacuum to that in our relationship from early on. And so it depends on the level of inness, because I wanted to create a foundation with my partner that meant anything was available, everything was an option. And it didn't mean we went from idea and desire to actually enacting the thing next week. Sometimes it's multiple years of conversation. And so we consider ourselves to be monogamish, which means everything's available. if we want it to be available. We're ready and willing to do the work. If the other person really wants something, then we're ready and willing to do the work in order for them to feel fully expressed. And there are certain topics that are very, very challenging. The idea of me being with another man is one that's going to take probably the longest length of time for us to discuss. And it won't go from idea discussion to, me being with another man. It might go idea discussion. We fantasize about it together, just us two. We talk about it as if it could happen, because that can bring up feelings and emotions. And then maybe that conversation, that fantasy leads to flirting with another man, and then debriefing. Maybe that step leads to, going on a date. It can move very slowly. And so I encourage people to go one step at a time, not necessarily jump from 1 to 10. Take your time, go to 2, 3, and 4 along the way and see how you do. Mm-hmm. A couple of resources that I would love to share with your audience for people who might be interested in any of the exploration. Know what you want and know your boundaries. And if that is tricky, then there's something called a want, will, won't list. It is my favorite resource that is like over 300 questions. And it asks you, what do you want? What will you do for your partner if your partner wants it? And then what is a won't? You absolutely do not want it. Red, pineapple, exit button. And so I have that as a free download on my Instagram all the time because it's just requested so much. So do that with yourself, do that with your partner. My recommendation would be, if you've never had a conversation with somebody about, and it's maybe your partner, or maybe it's like a person that you're getting ready to date, grab a bottle of wine, print out the list, make it sexy, maybe even take the list out to dinner and make it an event that's sexy, instead of like, well, are you ready to fill out this PDF? I printed it, don't do it like that.
So romantic. Everyone loves a good PDF.
I do, especially a really nicely branded one. The other resource that really ties in some of the other questions that you were asking me about is the relationship board meeting. And that is a way to relationship check-in. And you can do that if you're solo or if you're partnered with one person or many people. It's basically like on Sundays, we check in. How are you in this relationship? Are your needs being met? Is there something left unsaid? Air your grievances. Don't just wait to, I think it's December 23rd. That for all the Seinfeld people. So
it passed me right over. I've actually never watched that show.
Yeah. I've seen a handful. My sister, again, 13 years older than me. So she's a product of the 90s.
Okay.
So I know that's on December 23rd. You air your grievances. You put up your poll instead of a Christmas tree. It's a whole Seinfeld thing.
I'm going to get yelled at in the comments, guaranteed.
It's called Festivus.
Okay.
And my family does that. We air grievances on the 23rd for shits and giggles. Okay. And because it's, a Seinfeld thing and my sister loves Seinfeld. Anyway, that's besides the point. So that would be an opportunity. So it's a way that you can create a container. And so that stuff's not just leaking all around your relationship, coming out passive aggressively. And you're not just thinking that you're not going to ever be seen or heard. Mm-hmm. So it is also an opportunity for you to schedule some sex and plan when you maybe go on a date to do the want, will, won't list. So I wish that there was a sexier way to name this thing, this resource, but what we have is the most effective, and it's called the relationship board meeting. So that's a free resource too that I always have on my Instagram because I think all these things go hand in hand and I just want people to have them.
And that's in the little link tree link that's right there, the clickable link. Okay, amazing. So everyone should definitely go check that out. And we're going to go to a segment here in just a second where any places where people can connect with you. But I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up. I feel like I've seen in my own life, perhaps, and just roommates and just thinking through all my experiences, that it seems like there's this pattern in relationships where you start dating someone and there's this kind of this mystery and this unknown, and you're still kind of discovering the person. And then when you feel like you know them, whether that's actually accurate or not, maybe is up for debate, right? But when you feel like you know them, then things just kind of settle down and get into this routine. And that's maybe speaks to the boredom that some of your clients feel. And maybe many women listening to this, maybe they wouldn't necessarily admit it unless they really wanted to go deep in this area. But do you feel like for both guys and girls, they would consider they had better sex outside of a relationship rather than the sexual experiences they have inside a relationship?
Not necessarily. I think that it's a matter of adrenaline and certain neurochemicals that are dumping into the human body at a much larger amount at the beginning of new relationship energy. There's that whole experience is inherently risky. You don't know what that person comes with. You don't know their life circumstances. You don't know if they're going to stick around. You know, that NRE, limerence, one-itis, you only see that person, you want to fuck them all the time. That is very common at the beginning of a relationship. And people come to me and they say things like they just want to reignite the spark or get what they had back. I go, first things first, you're not going to get that thing back because that was that time. Mm-hmm. This is now this time. And there's so much more available than that's available right now with this person that you are safe with. And also, yeah, sex with strangers is hot. I don't know if it's ever not going to be hot. It's, like I said, inherently risky and you don't know what's going to happen. And so I think that pulling those things into fantasy, you asked a question earlier that I mostly answered, and then it fits here as well about if I have clients that are in open relationships or in polyamorous relationships. The answer is yes. And then kind of aside to that is I've worked with a number of people who have been a part of the lifestyle, which more people know that as swingers. They prefer the term lifestyle. And I've worked with people who have gone from hardcore Mormon and then had all their babies, all 15 of them. That was a joke. They had their babies and then are now figuring out life after and decided to leave the church. And I've had more than one client that this story is more or less what played out. So, and Salt Lake City, Utah, shout out. So they decide after babies are grown, what are we going to do with life? We're not fulfilled with the church, left the church, and then took the pendulum and literally fastballed it in the other direction, which was swinging and partying and exploring all these things that they didn't ever explore. And so they're almost like teenagers again. And then all of a sudden, they usually have the funds. They don't have kids in the house anymore. And like everything's available. Mm-hmm. However, if everything is available and all of that winds up turning into a routine as well, they find themselves in the exact same position. There's a difference between having a variety in sexual experience and a variety in sexual partners. Some people their fancies are tickled if their partner changes. The sex is the same more or less, but their partner is different. And then some people, myself included here, are tired of that. Mm-hmm. Just not interested really in having like a revolving door of partners. I would rather have very intentional, varied experiences. And so I want my sexual experiences to be creative and intuitive and to have like just different energy involved in it. And so if I'm going to say yes to someone who's outside of my relationship, they better be bringing it. Something that that we can connect with that's completely different to what I'm already experiencing in other areas of my life and with my partner. So we'll just throw that out there too, that yes, I do work with those kinds of people. And it's probably funny to hear that, yes, I work with people who are swingers or who are in the lifestyle so that they can bring more intentionality into those experiences so that they can actually achieve what they wanted when they decided to go into the lifestyle, which was expression and things to be hot and explosive and to, create these environments where the original, the primary partners, which is the original partnership, can love each other more and think it's all hot and exciting. But if it's like, if you can only create circumstances after several shots of tequila and it all kind of sloppily goes down in the same way every time, and it's like, you're just in the same position you were in your relationship minus the tequila, but kind of bored.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
My gosh. Okay. There's so much that I still want to ask, but we're getting up to the time where we're going to be done. So maybe we'll have to come back and do a follow-up, because I mean, this has literally in my mind opened up such a Pandora's box of even additional questions. Like I know I run a business with my wife. And so kind of what you spoke about, taking your business hat off. And I think for guys and girls, it's the same. If you bring that energy, the same type of energy, you're working late, and especially now here with everything, with the pandemic, our routines have been shaken up quite a bit. And so it's balancing all that is very difficult. But Alexa, I think one of the most impactful things that you've said without saying it throughout the entire podcast here is just being purposeful, being intentional. I think you did mention intentionality, but making a decision that this is what I want to do, want to be good at. This is how I want to be pleased or give pleasure. And being intentional with this area of your life, just like business, just like anything else, being good at anything else, you have to put that time and attention into it. And so I think what you do is so valuable. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing some of this with us. And I hope that, everyone watching this on YouTube and also listening to this on podcast form can go check what you do out. And really, if there are some unmet needs, if there are some questions that haven't been answered, start engaging with Alexa's content, because she is amazing. So where can people find you? Where do people go and message you, DM you, whatever? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is probably my favorite first interaction, because there's so much available. Just my whole Instagram feed is basically a free resource. Which is like looking behind, I like pull back the curtain in my own relationship with lessons, and then I put them out there. So I know that was a thing that my mom had to come to terms with too. Is like, wow, you live your whole life out there. So it is there. I'm oftentimes processing in real time. I'm on Insta stories a lot too.
Was that an adjustment, just really quick? Was that an adjustment kind of starting to put out, because you do on your Instagram, you are vulnerable. You're talking about your personal sex life. Mm-hmm. Was that hard for you, and was that hard for your partner?
It wasn't. When I first started writing, I was writing about experiences that were already past.
Okay.
And so I'd had time to process them, to figure out how I wanted to feel and think about them. I'd say, diffused some of the energy through my nervous system, so it wasn't going to be very shocking to me. And when I'm using that term a lot, managing your nervous system, it's like, how to regulate. I think I said that a couple of times in the show too. Like, I can regulate, so I'm not overwhelmed. Doing a thing isn't overwhelming to the system. So, now the gaps have gotten shorter and shorter. And so literally I just posted not that long ago about Jordan leading me through a whole breathwork experience. It involved nipple clamps and can of oxygen and nitrous oxide and all kinds of kinky things. And it was so beautiful. And we did that like a week ago, and I just wrote about it. So the gaps are getting closer and closer, but I'll also talk about the time when we didn't have sex for like a week plus, and how did we reintegrate, and how am I scheduling sex and all of that. So I share the other vulnerable stuff too. And I really think that me sharing my personal experiences and then creating a community where they share too. Mm-hmm. It's just, I feel like my little bits, my little corners of the internet at least I'd like to think they do, feel really safe. Mm-hmm. So even if you say nothing, but you just read all the things, like, you're winning. And I would say, like, if I may, here's my like last message for your listeners is, wherever you are at, consider where you may want to go in the not too distant future or in the future. And then my main thing that I want to leave you with is take responsibility. What does taking responsibility for your pleasure, or even if you can't think about your pleasure right now and you're just thinking about your partner's pleasure, if that's a better way to go at it, then what will it look like to take responsibility? It doesn't mean go 1 to 10. right off the bat, what does like a 2 or a 3 look like? Maybe that is interacting with me on Instagram or sending me an email or something like that. But either way, things aren't going to change unless you do something about it. And part of my purpose in life is to help you figure out what to do next. So.
Well, that is what we're here for. The whole entire segment of my show that does podcasts, this Jono show, is about that, is about in every area of your life, being purposeful, being intentional, and becoming the best version, like living up to your potential, but you can't exactly. People, you aren't going to accomplish anything unless you actually do the work to get there. So, Alexa, seriously, thank you so much. You are absolutely wonderful, and I have enjoyed this conversation so much. And I feel like I'm excited for the change that's going to happen in people's lives as they not only listen to this, but then start checking out your content and what you're putting out there, because it's definitely a need and definitely serves a huge community of people who may have this part missing from their lives. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will see you all in the next episode.